Well, a Pentagon UFO whistleblower has come forward. David Grush is his name, to say that the United States is in possession of vehicles of non-human origin. That's a government speak way of saying alien vehicles. In other words, the United States has alien vehicles in our possession. Watch.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will. It's probably not the right parlance, but no kidding, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
Well, John D'Souza is a retired FBI special agent who served for 25 years on the counterterrorism and paranormal cases. He had a top secret clearance during that time, during his time at the FBI. In fact, D'Souza literally collected the real-life X-Files that were used in the show, The X-Files. He has a lot to say about this UFO whistleblower story. John is here. John, welcome back to the show. And you have the distinction, my friend, for our audience that recognizes John, you and I, the interview that we did is the most watched interview in the history of Redacted, of this channel. So thank you very much. Over 2 million views right now on this video. Thank you, John.
Wow. Thank you, Clayton. That's owing to your skill and expertise as an interviewer and on this subject too, which you appear to have extraordinary knowledge on. So yeah, I'm very happy to be with you again. Thank you so much.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you back, and our audience was very excited to have you back on as well. So this story breaks over the past few days. Now, immediately in my heart, right, because I'm a kid at heart, we've known all of this. If you knee deep in this literature for many, many years, it seems obvious to us who follow this that the United States has had otherworldly vehicles for decades. This is not new news to people like you and me, people in the know, who've been tracking and following this. So we hear a UFO whistleblower from the Pentagon comes out and says this, and it sends shockwaves around the world like, oh my God, we're hearing from the Pentagon for the first time. My little spidey sense goes off, and I immediately think, psychological operation? Like, why are we hearing about this now? When you heard about this testimony and you heard about this whistleblower, what were your first thoughts? Can you tell us the truth here? What is going on with this story?
My first thoughts were what I really know personally, and it's about many whistleblower complaints from FBI people. Going back many, many years, I've had involvement with these people, going back all the way to counterterrorism whistleblower named Sybil Edmonds, another one named Robin Gritz, and including the modern whistleblowers that we have today, FBI agents Garrett O'Boyle, Marcus Allen, Steve Friend, all of whom were stripped of security clearance and fired from the FBI. So what my first thoughts were: extreme confusion from seeing David Grush's interviews and the things that he's going through, because it just didn't fit the mold of most whistleblowers. For instance, I just don't see, first of all, I'd like to thank David Grush for his service to this country, which is very important and very honorable thing. However, what's going on with this complaint is just bewildering, because first of all, what is the basis for his whistleblowing? For instance, all of the FBI whistleblowers, the basis for their complaints is the weaponization of the FBI against civilians,
Right.
which is highly illegal, improper, unethical. I mean, that is the basis for a whistleblower complaint. And all of these people have suffered enormous punishment and retaliation, and they've been fired, they've been persecuted, they've suffered extraordinary things. I'm not even clear from David Grush's interviews what was the is he even working anymore for the government? I can't tell, because he doesn't really address this, and that goes to another point. Real whistleblowers have something called righteous rage. they have righteous rage because they've been persecuted, they've been wronged tremendously, and I don't see that with
So
David.
you don't buy
Grush
it.
at all.
You don't buy it in his video responses.
Yeah.
He's is it something about his interview that it was standing out to you? And because he filed this complaint saying there's government suppression here, there's government suppression of these vehicles, and he's coming forward to be the person that's going to tell us all about this.
Right, right, but that's not an illegality. That's not an actual legitimate basis for a whistleblower complaint. The government is always allowed to not share information with the public. That's otherwise the entire national security structure couldn't function. That's one thing that I see as extremely problematic. Also, why can't I find the unclassified version of his whistleblower complaint? I looked for it everywhere. It's not out there. And it should, if this was a matter of public interest, like the whistleblower says, that should be released. That should be released. It should be available for everyone to have. But the other point is that I would invite people to go to News Nation now to see the full interview, which is astounding. It is astounding. I have never seen such a gushing softball interview from the supposed journalist who's at that site doing that with David Grush. It actually just seems much more like the beginning of a publicity tour. That's what it really looks like.
So publicity tour, another way to say this, psychological operation, or is not? No, this is not a psychological. Would you think this is a psychological operation? You're shaking your head.
Well, it's part of a. I believe it looks like it's part of a much larger psychological operation. And so what happens in these things is that they get a lot of people to work for the psychological operation unknowingly. They actually believe what they're doing is right, is correct, and that it needs to be done. They have many people who are working for this psychological operation, including congressmen and senators, U.S. senators, who are trying to get in on this because it's just extraordinary. So one thing I would ask for the people who are pushing David Grush forward is that they need to have him answer some real questions from a real journalist like maybe Whitney Webb to actually come forward in order to give this any legitimacy. Because I see all the comments everywhere I go. They just don't believe this. People, the regular people,
so
like your audience.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of people in our audience who are saying this looks like a psychological operation. When we covered it last night, I said this was one of the first alarm bells for me, psychological operation. The idea that, let me just unpack this a little bit. Do you believe, well, what he's saying at the basis is true, that the United States has all otherworldly vehicles in its possession that we are reverse engineering? Like that part is true, correct?
Well, truthfully, yes. I actually do believe that that's true. I do believe, but I have a hard time believing that he's a part of it. That's the part I'm having a hard time with.
I see. Right.
He's not telling us anything. I mean, even in that segment that you showed, this gushing supposed journalist is just asking him, yeah, so you're saying that we have pieces of these vehicles and we have actual vehicles themselves. How many? And he's just like, a bunch, a bunch. It's like,
what,
if you're
what
a real
tough questions, John? I would love to hear you, with all of your knowledge in this subject, what would you specifically ask him? If you were sitting down and we gave you a camera with David Grush, maybe give me 5 questions specifically that you would ask him.
Okay, then I'll have to pare it down. But yeah,
because you have 10, you have 20. give me your 5 best.
My 5 best, I would say, first of all, what you said, non-human origin technical vehicles. I would say, what is a technical vehicle? I don't know that. Maybe somebody here is an engineer or something, and they know what a technical vehicle is? Because I have no idea what that means. That would be my first one. Second, non-human origin. So, are you saying that the stuff could have been made by monkeys, by apes, by intelligent apes? I mean, if you mean alien visitors, why wouldn't you say that? Why wouldn't you just say that? Second of all, you said these are spacecraft. These are spacecraft. You use that word. How do you know these vehicles are from space? We're finding out now that a lot of UFOs, genuine UFOs, are actually from inner Earth. They're from beneath the oceans. They're even from volcanoes. So, is there some other basis of knowledge that you have that tells you these things are from space? That's one of the questions I would also.
And have you been on one of these craft to know that? Dr.
Well,
Michael Sala is reporting on this. Have you been on one of them? Have you traveled to the moon base, the secret space programs, space?
Well, that leads to another point. If you see the full interview, fuller interview on newsnationnow.com, if you see this, they actually, in the full interview, they actually seem to admit that it looks that way, that he has actually never personally seen these pieces or these vehicles himself, only in pictures, it appears. Only in pictures. I mean, that's devastating. And the journalist who was interviewing him appears to bury that at the bottom of the interview, because the journalist is actually feeding him questions. And then here's the other point about that as well, is that it really raised my suspicions when this individual who's being fed these, it's almost like he's being reminded of these answers by the journalist who is interviewing him in this puff piece over at News Nation Now. And one of the things that really stuck out to me is that in this entire psyop, there's a CIA phrase that they all use. And it's a CIA phrase because it's a psychological operation phrase that implies alien visitors, but doesn't directly say it. But it triggers all the neurons in our minds that associate with alien vehicles. And it's this: they are, and this whistleblower did it too. He was fed the line to say that says, quote, "Yes, this means that we are definitely not alone in the universe." And there's and they look up meaningfully at space, supposedly, when they say it. And they've all done this. They've all done this. And it's unbelievable because it's the exact same wording.
So what is at the heart of this psychological operation? For me, let me just give you my cynical view, which is, yes, of course we have otherworldly vehicles. We've been reverse engineering them for decades. We have this. We know this. It's absolutely 100% the case, right? We know this. Now, they're trying to create a boogeyman because we need another enemy. The deep state wants more money spent on the Space Force and an expansion of our military into space. And that's the psychological operation, that we need to create this enemy, this sort of benevolent, these benevolent beings that have been here sharing technology with us, as Dr. Michael Sala reports, and even his brand new book on this exact subject. We've been collaborating with them for decades. High-level members of the military have been collaborating with them for decades. Now, suddenly, they're an enemy? That's the psychological operation. That's the way I see it. Am I wrong or right?
That's exactly right. What's funny is I actually, last night, I saw your wife actually say what this really is. I think by accident, because
she's been around me too much. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's exactly this. She said, I only am concerned about things when it shows the global governance coming together with the military industrial complex. That's exactly what this is. And that's why this movement has so much power, so much resources behind it. And they may possibly be doing what we used to call in the old days, we used to call it triangulation, the Clintons actually made this into an art form where they would actually control their advocacy, but then they would also control the enemy as well, the supposed enemy, and they would have both sides fighting against supposedly fighting against each other, but then actually both sides would actually be working towards the same goal. And I think that we may possibly be seeing that here as well, where we have the whistleblower who's, he's kind of failing to show that righteous rage that all whistleblowers have. But he's probably gonna get better at that. It's going to get better at that, and that's what we really need to see, because this is this is possibly a very scary merger of global governance, which has control of all of these UAPs. They have control of all these UAPs, and the military-industrial complex, which wants to bolster itself. They haven't had any wars in a long time, and they need to bolster this, to get this going, because the Russia-Ukrainian conflict, it doesn't really go anywhere anymore. And so they need this. They need this for their resources and for everything that they're doing. So that's why we're going to see this operation continue, and it's going to get worse. And we may get more whistleblowers on this as well. But we'll see if they do a better job than David Grush has been doing here on this. So
well, we'd welcome him on the show. I'd welcome David here on the show, and I'd love to ask him these tough questions right here on Redacted. We'd love to have an open audience. I'll have him on for an hour. We'll do a whole hour special with David, and we'll dive deep. And there won't be any kissing of the ring or anything like that. Will be straightforward questions. So, bottom line, you think that he's being manipulated, he's being used, and he doesn't fit the mold of an actual whistleblower like the ones we saw testifying before Congress a few weeks ago.
Absolutely. And I would also ask him, because I've known a lot of these whistleblowers in the past, how did he lawyer up with the original Intel Community Inspector General as his attorney? So his whistleblower complaint is being examined by the Office of Inspector General. But at the same time, he actually got a former Inspector General to be his attorney. If you know any of, and he is completely lawyered up. I mean, I would not be surprised if they start suppressing anybody talking about him. But this is unprecedented. If you know any whistleblowers in real life, like these FBI whistleblowers, they have a very hard time even getting a private attorney to represent them, because the private attorneys all say, no, this is the government. This will be too hard. It's going to be impossible to do. So a lot of these whistleblowers, they don't have any attorney representing them. And this guy got an actual attorney from the agency that is evaluating his whistleblower complaint at the same time. It's like, how?
Great point. I'll get you out of here on this, John. Another thing that stood out to me last night was we learned that, of course, he had to run all of what he was going to say. He had to run it through the Department of Defense. He had to get approval to release this information from the Department of Defense. Having written books, you have to get approval from the FBI. You worked at the FBI before you release anything. In the same way that Jack Carr, who wrote the Terminal List, used to, to get all of his books approved, he has to run them through the CIA, and the CIA redacted different parts of his book. And you literally are reading his book and there's redactions. But the Department of Defense allowed him to come forward with this information. They signed off on it. Does that pass the smell test, or that's weird to me?
Well, it begs the question then, what is it that he revealed to be the basis of his whistleblower complaint and retaliation? It's like, if he's getting the approval and the encouragement of DOD to reveal the stuff that he's revealing, then what was the basis? What originally happened? I mean, the real whistleblowers, they always reveal something without permission from the government, and then the persecution that they suffer is unbelievable. I would encourage people to go look at the whistleblower complaint of this FBI agent, Garrett O'Boyle, who was so persecuted by the FBI, who was transferred from one jurisdiction to another with his 3 kids in tow and a new baby. And then in the middle of their move between jurisdictions, the FBI advised him that his security clearance was revoked, he had been fired, and he was not even going to get his goods back from the moving company the FBI had hired. And so he was literally homeless. Him and his family were homeless without anywhere to go and without the ability to get their goods back, because that was real retaliation against a real whistleblower. You have to look at these things to figure it out.
Great points. All excellent points. John, always great to see you. Don't be a stranger. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. How can people, you've got books, how can people connect with you online?
People just go to something, johnthamabooks.com, and they would go there to find my book, The Extra Dimensionals, where I actually explain what real UFOs are, where they come from, and why it is that the government can't shoot down UFOs, that they're not 57 Chevys with pieces coming off, that are just crashing all over the place and just being dead by the side of the road. That's not what this is. This technology is so far ahead of our own. It is not a 57 Chevy. People have to realize that, and that's why I wrote my book, The Extra Dimensionals, so people can actually see what real alien vehicles really are like.
John D'Souza, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, John.
Thanks so much, Clayton. Great being here.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.